So I want to start at the running back position. Who you like this week?
One of my favorite sleepers is rookie running back Jonathan Taylor for the Indianapolis Colts. I have him ranked as my RB21 this week, going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who last season allowed the second most fantasy points per game to running backs at nearly 30. And Jonathan Taylor gets to run behind that Colts great offensive line. And I think this is a game that the Colts are going to be playing with a lead, which I think means we could see a lot of Jonathan Taylor eating up the clock, because the Colts traded up to get this guy in the second round in a year they're clearly going all in. I think they're going to want to showcase their top rookie running back right out the gate.
What about Marlon Mack, though? Can't you just say that Marlon Mack's going to get all that action?
I mean, he could get some, but I would like to see the bulk of it go to Taylor.
Yeah, I think we all would. You know what's funny, too, is when everybody's talking about, I know we've had this philosophical debate off the air about how much you base on last year's statistics and last year's numbers. And it's cool to come in and be like, the Jags did this, but they have a completely different team. And I guess you could probably argue that it's worse, but still, it's a completely different team, right?
Yeah, and that's why I feel even better about them, because they lost even more pieces on their defense, and last year they were already the second worst team in fantasy against running backs. So I think that this is a week where both Marlon Mack and Jonathan Taylor can actually eat, because they might just be running on them all day.
I love that. I was lucky enough to get Jonathan Taylor on a few of my rosters. I'm going to start him this week. I'm on the rookie train. And speaking of the rookie train, I want to move on to wide receiver, and a guy you, Florio, have been hyping all offseason. Let's hit him with it.
Another rookie, and Kimmy, this is someone that I've drafted on a bunch of my fantasy teams. It is Dallas Cowboys wide receiver CeeDee Lamb, who is going up against the Los Angeles Rams, who last season allowed 12 touchdowns to players lined up in the slot. That was tied for the third most in the NFL, and that bodes really well for CeeDee Lamb, because the talk out of Cowboys camp this summer has been that he's going to line up pretty often in the slot, and that he may already be their best red zone weapon. And they're going to need him to step up, because the Cowboys played the Rams last year in Week 15, and Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper combined scored less than 5 fantasy points. So they're going to need someone to catch the ball from Dak Prescott.
Wait a minute. If I might throw the challenge flag, red zone, you know it's Blake Jarwin season, right? Like, that's our red zone guy. Don't start putting CeeDee Lamb in there to a guy, taking over for a guy that I have on seemingly every team.
I think Dak's going to throw more than one touchdown, so I think they could each get one, while Jalen Ramsey, they hold Cooper and Gallup in check.
Well, I already have Amari Cooper as a sit this week, and I was thinking about a stack where you think, I kind of like stacking Dak with Gallup, because I think that Jalen's going to just shut down Cooper, and I don't want a part of it. So you're saying not to? If you were going to stack, would you go with CeeDee Lamb over Michael Gallup?
I think those two are really close. I would go with Gallup just because it's Lamb's first game, and we don't know the connection, if it's there yet, between him and Dak, but we know it's there between him and Gallup. So I'd be going with the proven Gallup there, but I like both of them, to be honest. Okay,
well, you do the research notes on that show, so you would have had to change the answer anyway, so I think that works out. So that's what I'm doing, Gallup. All right, I got it. Thank you. Sorry. This is my own.
I'm staying completely away from this conversation, because I just do not want the smoke from Cowboy Twitter fans. So all Cowboys are good in my book. But Florio, I want you to hit me with another wideout who is a sneaky sleeper ahead of this week's matchups.
This is one of your guys, Kimmy. It's Emmanuel Sanders of the now New Orleans Saints. So that's going to look good seeing him in the black and gold. He is facing the Bucks this week. I have him ranked as my 39th wide receiver, because last year the Bucks allowed the second most fantasy points per game to wide receiver, and it gets even better. They also allowed the most fantasy points to players lined up in the slot last season, which Sanders is going to see a good amount of time from the slot. I think this has the potential to be one of the highest scoring games in week 1, and I think Emmanuel Sanders he's gonna have a nice debut for your Saints, Kimmy.
Yeah, I wonder though. Oh, you love it. I'm sorry. No. I don't want to cut you off. Listen, I don't want to cut you off. The Buccaneers though did play a little bit better towards the end of the season. I don't think that they weren't the walkover that they were earlier in the year. I know them and the Falcons started playing a little bit better. But I agree with you. I think that when you look, by the way, what does the F stand for?
Fantasy.
Gosh dang it. I walked right into that.
Michael Fantasy Florio.
I hate that. I hate myself for even asking that. But I do. I'm with you. I think that a lot of times when you're looking for flex help, that it's good to have somebody who is going to be on a high-scoring offense. And I remember that we've always been so hyper to find another guy in that Saints offense to go alongside of Michael Thomas that I think that Emmanuel Sanders might actually be that dude.
I love it. And this is, this is a conversation that we had earlier on Fantasy Live as we were looking at ADPs. And I know you spoke about him earlier in CeeDee Lamb, but CeeDee Lamb is being taken above Emmanuel Sanders. And we kind of have forgotten that back when he played for the Broncos, people would literally get in fights over getting Emmanuel Sanders on their roster. So let's just all keep that in mind ahead of the season. I think he's going to be someone who's going to be a sneaky sleeper all throughout the season. Michael Thomas finally has some help. Drew Brees is going to continue to be dynamite. So I love that. You're right. That is my guy, Emmanuel Sanders. But actually, speaking of my guy, we're going to go to the tight end position. You guys know it. Maybe our fans don't. I went to college with this guy. He was one of my best friends. Tell him who it is, Florio.
Yeah, this is literally your guy. I know you're really good friends with him. Noah Fant of the Denver Broncos. And I think he has a really strong matchup. I think he's going to come out strong for you, Kimmy. He faces the Tennessee Titans, who last year allowed the 6th most fantasy points per game to tight ends at just under 14. And last year, Fant flashed a lot of that athletic upside that he possesses. We saw him score 20 fantasy points in multiple games. The issue was consistency, but you expect that out of a year one tight end. It's not often that a rookie tight end is someone who is a player you can start every single week in fantasy, but I think Fant is a great chance to be a year two breakout because he has all the physical tools and he now should feel more comfortable in that offense and in the NFL. I think he has a big year this year, and I think it starts with a big week one against the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, I feel like it takes so much longer for a tight end to get up to speed. I think that even, these first-year guys, we were expecting way too much out of them. I know TJ Hawkinson was a guy who was overhyped. He had that huge week one last year and kind of disappeared. Noah Fant, everybody expected him to be the superstar because Joe Flacco was the tight end whisperer. And of course, Noah Fant has 2 100-yard games last season, one with Brandon Allen and of course one with Drew Lock. But coming into the second year and having some familiarity with that offense, I think this is an opportunity for him to shine.
I talked to Noah earlier this offseason, and I talked about his relationship with Drew Lock and just his expectations going into year two. And he said he has never felt so comfortable on a football team. He feels like he has a great relationship with Drew. They've built a rapport with one another, and he's also put on some size. He is one of the most mobile, fast, speedy tight ends in the league. He looked up to George Kittle when they both played together at Iowa. It was George Kittle, TJ Hawkinson, and Noah Fant. So it's a tight end university. I expect big things out of Noah. And no, I'm not biased, but Noah, if you're watching this, please do well. I have you starting in so many of my leagues. But finally, Florio, I want to move on to the quarterback position. I talked about your beard earlier. This guy is known for his mustache.
Oh, yeah. He is the nicest mustache in the NFL, hands down. And he's one of my favorite QB2s this year. And it is Gardner Minshew of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And what should make you feel good, he's not for a 10-team league this week. But if you're in a deeper league or a 2-quarterback league, it should make you feel good to get him in. That last year against the Colts, he scored 24.5 fantasy points, threw for 3 touchdowns, nearly 300 yards. That was his career high, his highest game of any point last year. The Colts last season allowed over 18 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, which ranked in the top 12 of the NFL. And I like Minshew because he can add fantasy points with his legs. And like I said with Jonathan Taylor, I think the Colts are going to be leading in this one, which leads to the Jaguars trailing late, which leads to more passing volume for Gardner Minshew. I think this is just the perfect recipe for fantasy success. Maybe not the best real-life success. I think the Colts win this game, but I think Minshew has a really strong fantasy day.
I think it's important to point out, too, that last year he had more passing touchdowns than Kyler Murray. He had less interceptions. He's a pretty athletic player as well. So I really like Gardner coming into this season. And I would say that this year more than most, with everything that's going on in the world, and we don't know how COVID is going to eventually affect the season, that this is probably the year that you have to have 2 quarterbacks, even in 10-team leagues. And I think that Gardner Minshew is the guy to have on your bench and to stash for those reasons that fantasy Florio was talking about.